All right. Aloha, everyone, and welcome. Really grateful that you're here with us today. My name is Deborah Green. I'm the founding director of Safe Tech Hawaii, and I'm so honored to be co-hosting this event with the Venerable CC Doucette. I'm going to talk first for just a little bit to give you my story, and then I'm going to hand it over to CC, who is going to bestow her wisdom upon you. So my PhD is from Ohio State University, and my background is in energy medicine. And energy medicine does not refer to like nuclear energy or solar power or anything like that. It deals exclusively with human energy. And so what we do is we study what affects our human energy flow, what impacts it, what enhances it, what restricts it or inhibits it, what disorganizes it, and so forth, and what we can do about that. And so with that knowledge base, I was aware of the effect of wireless radiation on the human energy system, and it's not pretty. So then back in 2012, when I was living in Maui Meadows on Maui Island, my very neighborhood was chosen as a pilot project for smart meters. And the utility was heavily promoting the smart meter project, and their goal was to get 200 households to sign up for a voluntary smart meter on their house. And nobody was speaking out against this. And so I decided it's probably going to be me. So I dove into the research and found that, in fact, there is abundant research by peer-reviewed scientific journals on the effects, the negative health effects of wireless radiation. And so I organized a group. We called ourselves at that time Keep Your Power. And we became very active. We showed up at meetings and we asked difficult questions. We held sign wavings. We enacted a notice of liability process. We collaborated with Josh Del Sol, who is the director and producer of the award-winning film Take Back Your Power. I did some fundraising and we purchased 600 copies, DVD copies of Josh's film. And then I recruited 40 volunteers and we went door to door in Maui Meadows in my neighborhood. And the neighborhood consisted of about 600 households at that time. And we knocked on every door. We gave everybody a free copy of the DVD of the film, Take Back Your Power. We gave them information sheets and we left these, or if people were home, we spoke with them and educated them about the dangers of wireless radiation and smart meters. And the utility's goal was to sign up 200 households in Maui Meadows into the smart meter pilot project. And in the end, they ended up with 44. So, we consider that a win. And the interesting thing that happened was because it was a pilot project, they were supposed to release the results and, supposedly sing the praises of smart meters and how fantastic they were and how they saved everybody money or whatever. The results were never made public. To the best of our knowledge, the results were never made public. And so, we think that we had an impact and that their pilot project was not successful. So we were just sort of resting and recovering from the whole smart meter, action. And then 5G arrived on the scene. And we're like, okay, time to get active again. And so we changed our name to Safe Tech Hawaii in order to align with different organizations that were popping up all over the country that were using the Safe Tech name. And so we then launched into, opposing 5G deployments and have had success with that. We were able to stop, for example, 2 5G towers on Maui. We got a resolution passed in Hawaii County that opposes 5G until it can be proven safe. We know that can't happen. I will mention that it is a resolution, meaning it's only a resolution, and I hate to use that word only because it is important, but a resolution does not have legal teeth. And so some people, when I say, oh, we got this resolution passed on Big Island, they think it means that there's no 5G on Big Island because of the resolution. And unfortunately, that's not true. But we're not done yet. We are continuing our efforts. And a resolution is a first step. So, there's a process that needs to be gone through when it comes to legislative actions. We also published a couple of voter guides over the years. When there are elections in Hawaii, I refer to them as my phone angels. Volunteers, we're an all volunteer grassroots homegrown organization, folks. And I mean, I look back at all the work we've done and I'm pretty astounded by it myself, to be honest with you, if I can brag a little bit. But anyway, we did these voter guides where we contacted all of the candidates in the state of Hawaii and asked their stand on 5G and their awareness about wireless radiation. And then compiled the information and published it into our voter guides so that people could be, voters can make more informed choices when they're in the voting booth. So all of this is published on our website, by the way, safetechhawaii.com. And I mean, I could go on and on. I'll just mention one more of our projects, and that was, again, volunteers. We went out into the field on all the main islands, and we tested the radiation coming off of towers and antennas. And we tested the majority of infrastructure, with the exception of Oahu, because Oahu is so saturated that it became an impossible task for our little team. But the rest of the islands, we tested the majority of infrastructure so that you know what you're being exposed to simply by living, nearby a tower or antenna. And that information is, again, published on our website, safetechhawaii.com. So we've been really active. We've tried to do things, that to educate people, and we're constantly advocating for safe technology. So there's more. I'm going to stop now, and I will say that all of what I've mentioned pales by comparison to Cece Doucette, my co-host today. She has accomplished extraordinary things. I'll just highlight a couple of them. She is the director of Massachusetts for Safe Technology. She has introduced legislation in Massachusetts that helped schools there become the first in the nation to begin safeguarding students and teachers and staff from wireless technology. And she's an invited lecturer at the EMF Medical Conference. And I mean, Cece is so involved in many aspects of this issue that I could probably spend the rest of our Zoom call, listing everything that she's done over the years. Her knowledge is encyclopedic, and she is tireless in her efforts. And I'm so honored to be co-hosting with her today. Thank you for this opportunity, Cece.
Deborah, right back at you. You are teaching me so much, because if I understood just how critically important the grassroots effort was 10 years ago when I got started, I probably would have done more of that, which is what I want to focus on for 2024. So that's why we continue to do these education sessions. I'll bring in guests every month from all over the country, because we all have unique stories to share and hopefully inspire others with. So I'm just so grateful and humbled that you were able to take the time to join us from Hawaii today. Some of you may know that I went through high school in Hawaii, so it holds a very dear place in my heart before I came to school for college in Boston. So I know personally you're helping my own loved ones on the islands there, and I'm so very grateful. So All right, everybody. So we will spend the next hour, hour and a half sharing the facts with you. And I will use a screen share. Just one moment. Let me just get our spotlights going right here. So I'm going to do a screen share, and we're going to use a set of slides that I will bring up right in just one moment. And Deborah, can you give me a nod if you can see my slides now? Okay, great. So we're going to give you guys my slides, and everywhere in my slides where you see a blue underline like this, that means you can just click on it and get right directly to the information, because for the first couple of years when I was researching this, wow, there was so much information and I got really overwhelmed and I couldn't remember how to get back to credible resources. So if by putting this deck together for you, it helps you to get to the information as quickly as you can, then we'll feel good about that. So this MTPW after my name just means that I had the privilege of earning a master's in technical and professional writing from Northeastern University here in Boston, after I earned my bachelor's in communication studies from Northeastern. So I was really lucky. I got a terrific education, and never in a million years did I imagine that I would be using these writing and speaking skill sets to do this kind of work. But wow, I'm so glad I got to. So as Deborah mentioned, when I fell down the rabbit hole with this, I had been the president of our local education foundation at my children's schools. And this was at the time when the industry was pushing in their 21st century classroom. And we are a small school in a small town in Massachusetts, and our budgets had been cut to the bone year after year after year. So we're like, gosh, we don't have the funding to bring all this technology in. So, good to be parents, we raised our hands and jumped in and started doing fundraising to get wireless infrastructure, to get iPads and Chromebooks and smartboards and minis and Apple TVs, and what we were being told our kids would need to succeed in our world today. So that's when I fell down the rabbit hole. And I have a girlfriend who's an electrical engineer, and one night at book group, she said she was reading a book called Zapped by Anne Louise Gittleman, and it was starting to teach her that wireless is not harmless. So Wendy tipped us off at book group, but it was book group. So I just made a mental note of it and I didn't do anything. And then not long after that, I at the time was the grant coordinator for our school district, and something crossed my desk that the American Academy of Environmental Medicine, now these are the doctors who get the conundrum cases that regular doctors aren't trained for. They deal with all the environmental illnesses. So I see this position statement from the American Academy of Environmental Medicine telling our school superintendents, do not let wireless into the schools. And I went, uh-oh. So that really caught my attention. And I thought, well, is there any science to this? So then I just started looking, and once you know, you will be astounded at the thousands of peer-reviewed studies, as Deborah mentioned, that are out there. But who would even know to look, because the only messaging we get from corporate mainstream media is all Wi-Fi all the time, and isn't 5G great, and shouldn't we all just have it today? So I started looking at the science, and I reached out to my schools, and I thought that they would respond as if we had a gas leak in the science lab at school, right? Shoot, get the kids out of the building until it's safe, and then let's bring them back in. But I got crickets, literally no response. And so I start sharing the information I'm finding. And one of our school committee members, who's now our school committee chairwoman, is a former attorney. She raised 4 children. She's a yoga instructor. She's just got all these combined skills that make her an amazing person. So she and I are sharing information back and forth. And I'm saying, look, did you see that the French National Library took wireless out in 2008 because of the health risks? Did you see that pockets of Belgium and Italy and Israel are removing Wi-Fi from the schools because of the health risks? So we're sending stuff back and forth, and ultimately And it was not an easy conversation to have district-wide because, mind you, the industry got in there with their 21st Century Classroom campaign, got a huge head start, penetrated at the state level Department of Education, embedded it into the curriculum that you are not going to get good reviews, which means your funding, if you don't embed this into the curriculum. So they got in way ahead of where I got started. And I didn't know it at the time, but we became the first in the United States to even have this little sign hanging in our classrooms with precautionary measures. Turn these things off when we're not using these devices. Turn off the wireless when you're not using it. And never, ever put a device on your body, and we'll walk you through why that is. So I thought maybe I was the first one figuring it out in my area, maybe in my town, but so we became in 2014 the first in the country to actually have this little sign hanging in our classrooms. And then I thought, okay, well, it's just a sign and they're not actually doing it. So I met with my state senator, who's now our Senate president, Karen Spilka, and I met her for coffee hours and I showed her the science and I showed her Ashland's little sign that's hanging in our classrooms now. And then I measured her cell phone and her district director's laptop, and both devices went way off the charts with microwave radiation. So we started working together. She put me with a lawyer in her office, and we came up with a very simple bill that would form a commission, get the right minds at the table at the state level, and figure this out. So we have had legislation in Massachusetts for 10 years now. And I was congratulated because I've had the privilege of connecting with so many experts around the world on this. Being a tech writer, I just created a template and said, hey, would you be so kind as to take a few minutes and send in a statement to support these bills? So we've had a number of our bills reported out of committee favorably, but we've never, ever passed one into law. We will tell you about New Hampshire, though, because they did, and we'll walk you through how that happened. And then I was contacted by somebody in Europe who also saw what was going on with the schools and realized that you can't fix it until people know about it. So education has to be a key component. And as Deborah noted in Hawaii, it literally takes knocking on somebody's door and introducing yourself very kindly and professionally and saying, we have a problem that you might be interested in. So I was contacted by these folks in Europe, and we have formed a little nonprofit to create the education. We literally have an online course that can be completed in about a half an hour. So we are poised to train an entire school district or an entire municipality, and it kicks out a little certificate of completion at the end so human resources can track off who got trained. And it gives a tip sheet with handy reminders at the end. So we've been working on that since 2016. And then somebody tipped me off that there was a team of experts coming to the State House here in Massachusetts. And literally for 2 years, I was the only one I knew who could talk about this issue. And honestly, I didn't really know what I was talking about at the time because I was just immersing myself. So I go down to our State House, and there's this expert forum with Dr. Deborah Davis, who founded the Environmental Health Trust, which is arguably the world's greatest think tank and database on this topic and other environmental pollutants. And she also was on the team that won the Nobel Peace Prize for climate change. So I'm like, wow, she's kind of a big deal. And then she brought with her Frank Clegg, who's the retired president of Microsoft Canada. And Mr. Clegg had been addressed by some of the scientists in Canada. They went and measured his house, and he did a complete 180. He had been promoting this technology for 30 or 40 years. And now that he's retired, he has founded Canadians for Safe Technology, and he's been doing up there with their parliament and other groups trying to get this information out to the public. So I'm sitting there going, whoa, there's a captain of industry here saying, turn around and go the other direction because we are not safe in North America, the US and Canada, and every other country that has become so technologically advanced. So also who flew in for that panel at our State House was Dr. R.S. Sharma from India. Now, Dr. Sharma has done some of the fertility studies and saw that this radiation is killing sperm. And he has taken the Indian radiation levels way up here where ours are still here in North America. And at least on paper, he's taken them down 90% based on trusted science. So that at least shows that with some political will, we can make serious inroads on this issue. So we're down at the State House. Oh, and Dr. Catherine Steiner Adair was there, and she's a psychologist who lectures all over the world on what technology is doing to our children. She takes it from the wee little ones all the way up through high school and says, you know, children need downtime. They need creative space where they can go play outside under the rhododendron and go into deeper and deeper and deeper levels of imaginative play, because that's what helps to properly develop a child and their brain, not sitting in the shallows of a screen, especially with programs that are not even evidence-based, right? So it was really eye-opening. I went and bought her book the next day. It's called The Big Disconnect. And it talks about how a child's brain is no longer developing properly on point in all the areas where human capacities are developed. Empathy, the ability to self-soothe, and how to actually get outside and do what kids are supposed to be doing. So this was an amazing panel, and I was so gratified to be in a room full of people talking about this, because for 2 years I had nobody I could talk to. So it was standing room only at our State House. And so I started connecting with everybody in the room, and we ultimately founded Massachusetts for Safe Technology. And I like to share this link with you because I built a website, and it's not dark and scary. There's a lot of light, a lot of nice pictures, and just really quick ways for you to see what are we doing at the state level? What are our state agencies failing to do to protect us? And what are some of the amazing inroads that are happening? We have a page with resources on it, so you can drill down to anything that you need to find. And we have a take action page that will help you to get started from wherever you are. You know, we know this is a big topic, so be gentle with yourself, take baby steps, learn a little bit, make a few changes, come back, learn some more, make some more changes, and then ultimately start working with others around you, because when there are others working with you, it makes this a whole lot easier. So somebody down at the National Institutes of Health found my work and asked me to co-chair the technology panel for the Health in Buildings Roundtable Conference. And this is people from our government agencies, from our hospitals, doctors, this is urban planners, this is architects, and so many people who are taking responsibility for the health inside of our buildings. And this was the first time that the wireless radiation issue was brought into the conversation. So I like to share this link because if you want to grab something that's quick and highly credible, we had Dr. Martin Pall flew in for this. He's one of the world's leading scientists. We had Frank Clegg from Microsoft Canada. We had Peter Sullivan, and I found Peter Sullivan's work online through a YouTube presentation. Peter, in his younger days, was a fighter pilot for our government, you know, Top Gun. And so he was up, way up high, where the Earth's electromagnetic fields are really high, inside of an airplane equipped with radar all over it and all the instrumentation on the paneling inside the plane. So Peter got walloped and his health started crashing. And he started losing weight. His teeth started getting really brittle. You know, we know it does stuff to our bones. So Peter eventually moved on. He was a Silicon Valley engineer. His friends invented the cell phone. You know, he's kind of a big deal. And when his children, his two sons, came into the preschool years, both of his boys wound up on the autism spectrum. So I'm listening to a lecture that Peter was giving, and his boys were now grown young men, successfully went through college. And he said, and my boys are no longer on the autism spectrum. And I did a what? I didn't even know it was an option. And there's something called de novo mutations, which means it didn't come from mom's bloodline. It didn't come from dad's bloodline. It came from somewhere in our environment. So when we can address environmental exposures, and we don't want to overpromise anything because biologically everybody is different, but there are major inroads to be made when we address the man-made frequencies that we have introduced to our environment. So Peter came in for this conference, and then Theodora Scarato, who's the executive director of the Environmental Health Trust with Dr. Deborah Davis, she came in to share what other countries are doing. And there's a lot of good to report on this topic all over the world. But until we come up to speed on what this issue really is, find the courage to start addressing it for ourselves and knowing where to go for resources. That's why we do these webinars every month, to make your job easier. Because as soon as you open your mouth and go, I think there's something wrong with wireless, everybody in our society today has been conditioned to go, oh, tinfoil hat conspiracy theorist, right? And how would we know any different when the only messaging we get through mainstream media and social media is all Wi-Fi all the time, and you're not cool unless you're using it, right? So we want to make your job as easy as we can. We're here to support you. And so all these talks at the NIH were 10 minutes or less. That's why I like to share that link, because you can get right to highly credible people in snippets that people can digest. One of the biggest gaps we had when I fell down the rabbit hole is we could see so many people, adults and children, getting sick. And they'll go to their doctors, and their doctors will run the tests they know to run, come up empty, and say, well, you must be fine. And then you wind up paying thousands of dollars out of pocket to go see a specialist. They run the tests they know to run, come up fine, and say, you're fine. And you know you are not fine when you have microwave sickness. And so, or even worse, because they hadn't been trained, they will throw you into a psych ward and tell you you're crazy, much like what we used to do with Lyme disease more than a decade ago. So we are so grateful to Dr. Lynn Patrick and Elizabeth Kelly, who founded the first EMF medical conference. So conferences, the first one was in 2019, and the most recent one was from 2021. And these things take huge resources, both time and money, to pull together. And I do not know of another one that's being put together right now. So this past July, the opportunity to earn 24.5 continuing medical education credits accredited, that opportunity expired in July. But Libby Kelly took the entire conference, every lecture, every panel with the experts, every Q&A session, all of the promo materials, the little 2-minute trailer, and then the pre-conference primer on what are EMFs. EMF simply stands for electromagnetic fields. So these are the pulsations of man-made energies that are coming out of our man-made devices. So electromagnetic fields of radio frequency, microwave radiation is what we're talking about today. There are other health considerations around, let's say, the wiring in our home. In commercial builds, all the wires have a foil liner around it that's called shielded. It's shielded with a foil liner. So these man-made frequencies can't pulsate out into our living spaces. Unfortunately, the way the building codes are today for residential builds, they don't use the shielded wires. So some people whose body becomes sensitive to these man-made energies also need to address the other kinds of electromagnetic fields, from the electricity and the magnetic field. So just know at that EMF medical conference, there are courses that address that, and the entire conference is now free and available to everybody in the world to just go learn with leading experts. So please know that is an incredible resource. The lectures go from like 18 minutes to a half an hour to an hour, so you can easily schedule them into your calendar. And again, learn a bit, digest it, come back and learn a little bit more. So please know, for all the horrific things we're going to share with you today, there are solutions at every turn, but there's no cavalry coming. Nobody is coming in to fix this for you. That's why we do what we do every month. So you've always got a safe place to go. And in between, just shoot us emails and we'll do our best to help you find the answers you're looking for. Okay, so that's how I got involved in this. So what actually triggered my schools to put this little sign up in all of our classrooms was when they read the legal fine print. So anybody with us who owns an iPhone, I invite you to take that out right now. And if you don't have an iPhone, that's okay. You can still get to this information, but I know how to find it right in the iPhone. You can go to this webpage that the Environmental Health Trust put up called See the Fine Print, and you'll see that we have been warned all along. This is not safe. In the iPad, it used to say seizures, blackouts, eye strain, and I personally know of 2 families in towns neighboring mine where the children had their first seizures while using these tablets. And what did we do during the pandemic? We issued every child a wireless device with no safety instruction. So again, we have the training. We can bring it. If you can create the opportunity, we'll bring it. Okay, so from an iPhone, go into your settings and a little ways down, hit general. So settings, then general, and then go all the way down to the bottom. And near the end, you'll see legal and regulatory. Hit that. From legal and regulatory, about 4 down from the top, you'll see RF exposure. That's radio frequency, radiation, 2-way microwave radiation that they politely call energy. And in that fine print disclaimer, it tells us a couple of really important things. One, they tested this device at a distance from the body. So if you are tucking it in your bra or putting it in your shirt pocket or your pants pocket or your back pocket or your waistband, you are exceeding the Federal Communications Commission's public radiation exposure limits, which, by the way, were never biologically safety tested and never even protected us. A little further down in another paragraph, it says, if you wish to reduce your exposure, don't touch it. It says use a hands-free option or a headset. Now, I'm going to take us out a screen share for just a minute and show you a couple of demonstrations. So again, guys, there is a solution for everything that we've broken here. So instead of putting a wired headset up to your brain or using earbuds, which have microwave transmitters now plugged in on both sides of your head, one of the properties with this man-made radiation is it likes metal. It amplifies around metal. So if you plug a regular headset into your phone with a wire that's going straight to your brain, that radiation's like, woohoo, party on, man, we're going right up to the brain now. So instead, if you must use a radiating device, you want to start creating as much distance as you can. This is something called a hollow tube or an air tube headset. See how it's just got rubber that hooks over the ear and goes into the brain? There's no metal, so it's not drawing any of the ambient radiation that's just floating around the air. And it has these little ferrite beads on it that break the radiation coming from the wire. It breaks it here, but you still get good acoustics, kind of like a doctor's stethoscope through the rubber tubing. And then you've got a volume control. You can do your muting or whatever. And then a nice long cord so you can set your device that's radiating as far away from you as you can. So again, a hollow tube or an air tube headset would be a far better choice. Please don't ever put those earbuds up to your brain or the Bluetooth, headset right up to your brain. a really bad idea. So one of the things that they don't tell us in that legal fine print is that these devices are given to us with multiple antennas radiating at once. So we haven't been trained to think of them as different services, but they really are. Every antenna represents a different service in your phone. So you have cellular and data, you have Wi-Fi, you have Bluetooth, you have you have Bluetooth, you have locator, you have hotspot. And for anybody who didn't know any better, they've now given you additional antennas in here that can be turned on by them at any point in time. And each one of these antennas is separately going, here I am, where are you? Here I am, where are you? Here, pulsing this microwave radiation to make or maintain a handshake with the nearest cell tower or router. And again, today's message is not no technology, it's safe technology. And we can teach you how to do that. So I want to give you a demonstration because I had a really hard time getting my head around this. It's invisible. How do we even know we're being exposed? Well, this is a radio frequency radiation detection meter. It was the one that was recommended at the EMF medical conference. And now I know doctors who are bringing this into their practice. There's one here on the North Shore in Massachusetts. She bought the meter. She loans it to her patients for $10 and says, take it and go home. You've got 2 hours. Go home, do your scavenger hunt, write down where these exposures are coming from, come back, and I'm going to teach you what to do. And she's actually doing a set of classes this month in person in Beverly, Massachusetts. So anybody interested in that can go on my website under events and find that. But so this is called the Safe and Sound Pro 2 broadband radio frequency detection meter. Now, when I turn it on, you'll see all the lights go to confirm it's working, and then it will settle down, hopefully into the green, because I've figured out what I needed to do in my house. So we're in the green. It uses a unit of measurement called a microwatt per square meter. So basically within 3 feet of air, how much man-made radiation is there? In the scientific literature in our sleeping areas, they want us to be at 10 microwatts per square meter or less. Indoors in general, you kind of want a gun for 100 or less. And then outdoors, it's 1,000 or less, so long as you're not standing and spending time right under something that's transmitting. So right now at my home, I'm looking at the max number, which is the middle readout, because it's this spike, this maximum spike of microwaves that is actually damaging our cells. So averages, if you stick your hand in a fire, you're not going to get harmed by the average. You're going to get harmed by the peak of that flame. So averages mean nothing other than the industry tries to say, oh, but the average is really low. Averages aren't hurting us. The spikes are, and that's what the max is. So I'm at 4. I'm going to take my cell phone out of airplane mode so that we can see and hear what happens. So I'm not doing anything. These are just the antennas doing their job of sending and receiving signal. And so I don't use I'm going back into airplane mode because.
And Cece, can you read the numbers off
Yeah.
for us? Because we couldn't see it very well, but it's off the charts, basically. Is that a 2.5 million max?
Actually, so this is one of the more recent Safe and Sound Pro 2s, and Rob Metzinger is the engineer that designed this. The one that I originally purchased went to 2.5 million. This one goes to 3,180,000 microwatts per square meter. So just by turning on those antennas, I topped this meter out. I was at 4, just 4, not 4,000, not 4, just 4. And that one cell phone brought me over 3 million. So that is what we have allowed technology to do to our world today. So what does that mean? Let's go in now and take a look at the science. So I'm going to go back to my screen share. But again, we want to give you encouragement at every turn because we know this is a lot. So, for a lot of us, once we learn about this, our brains just start tracking on to solutions. So I thought, well, the Boston Marathon runs through our town, and we have a little pot of money because they donate bibs to every town on the route. People take those bibs and do fundraising, and now we have a nice little pot of money in our town to distribute out for community programs. So I thought, let's get a couple of meters. We'll put one in the library and we'll give one to the schools. And then we can just do our gap analysis. How much is the radiation? What do we need to do to fix it, right? Sounds so simple. It's been 10 years. But it took me 3 tries. I had to go in and educate every member of our select board, which is our form of government, kind of like a city council here. And then the first time they said, oh, we don't know what you're talking about. Come back next time. So I resubmit my application 6 months later. I come back and they go, oh, well, we're really not sure about this. It's probably more of a Board of Health issue. So they lobbed me over to the Board of Health, and I'd already been talking to our health agent, and he had told me that back in the 90s, when the industry was coming in with the first cell towers, they literally wined and dined our municipal agents. They took them out to big fancy hotels and brought them pretty dinners and said, hey, here's this great technology. And by the way, if anybody has any concerns about, impact on the environment, well, gosh, so sorry, but that 1996 Telecom Act says you can't sue us. So that's how we got started in this entrapment with the industry. They literally got the Telecom Act of 1996 passed that said if there are any environmental considerations, you have no legal recourse. So this was my local health agent telling me this. So I knew that they didn't know any more than I knew, and I probably knew more than our Board of Health knew at the time too. So, but I just kept thinking it's so easy to fix if we just start gathering our data. And so by this time, my bill had come out at the State House. And as I was testifying before the Joint Committee on Public Health, and I'm holding up our meter and I'm holding up our little sign and I'm showing the science, I could tell that not one member of the Joint Committee on Public Health in Massachusetts had any clue that this issue existed. So my poor husband, here I had the privilege of earning 2 degrees. I should be earning some pretty big bucks by now to pad our retirement. And one of my children had been diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. So I had left the workforce to keep her alive. And had always said, once we get the kids through school, I'll go back and I'll contribute again in a meaningful way. And then this issue found me. And so I said to poor Steve, I said, honey, I got to go educate these legislators because they have no idea. So I've spent years literally educating one by one every legislator in Massachusetts who served on one of the committees that was assigned one of these bills. And as I was educating the health committee, I could see from their eyes, not one of them had any idea. So then I thought, okay, I got to educate them. I got to get back to my town and one by one educate our leaders. And once I did that and I brought the facts, it was still uncomfortable for them, but they could see there was something here. So they gave me funding to get 1 meter for the library conditionally that our board of trustees at the library would also agree to bring it into circulation. So mind you, this was back in 2016. And it was not an easy conversation. I met with the board of trustees. There were 5 of them, and one elderly gentleman sat there like this the whole time and just shot me eye daggers. Another one said, I want to get that meter and I want to take it home and see what's going on. And a third one said, well, regardless of how we feel personally, we are a conduit of information in our community. So let's take a vote. And they voted 4-1 to bring this meter into circulation in our library. So we became the first in the US to do this at the community level. We also, the Friends of the Library, which is another nonprofit affiliated with our library, they sponsored a 6-part documentary film and discussion series, and that film that Deborah mentioned, Take Back Your Power, was one of the ones that was chosen for that. So we can do great things with our libraries. So then the first medical conference in California, I flew out. I was honored to speak there on state and local policy. And while I was in California, I met a doctor from Newton, Massachusetts. She and I came back and went after a grant from the state level cultural council. Every town gets a pot of money from our cultural council at the state level. And we were able to get some programming for her library plus a meter to put on loan. And now out here in Pittsfield, Massachusetts, Verizon illegally put a cell tower on top of a neighborhood that made 17 children and adults so sick, they have had to abandon their home. And because we are where we are today with technology, most libraries are having to reinvent themselves. And so in addition to just letting out books, they now have a library of things in many communities. And my daughter, for example, is on the wait list to borrow a power washer from her library. So there are games, there are videos, there's equipment. So it's easy today to go in and ask, could we please get a radiation detection meter put on loan in our library? And a lot of libraries can do it straight out of their budgets. Some can say, well, gosh, this Safe and Sound Pro 2 is a $400 meter. We can do maybe 200. So maybe somebody in the community would like to kick in and donate. Others have just outright bought it and put it into circulation in their library. If anybody is really challenged, though, please reach out to the Environmental Health Trust. They have a small grant fund that if the librarian, it can't be a citizen, it's got to be the librarian. If the librarian reaches out to the Environmental Health Trust, they may be able to help you get one in circulation. So lots of great things you and I can all do at the local level. And then our local cable stations are awesome. They're like the last bastion of independent reporting left in our country because mainstream media is now where we used to have 50 mainstream media outlets. They've been bought out and they've been bought out and they've been bought out. And now 4 to 6 companies, major, massive corporations own all of mainstream media. And they're the same companies that own the technology companies and they own the wireless industry. So our local cable stations love it when citizens come to them and say, hey, I want to do a program, right? So I went to my local cable station. They've done a whole bunch of little 2 to 5 minute public service announcements with me that run in the community. And then they sent resources to my house with a cameraman. And we did a walkthrough of my home of what common radiation exposures look like today. So we show my printer, we show the laptop, we show the microwave oven, we show the decked cordless phone, the laptops, all of it. And then offer suggestions for what you can do to reduce your exposure. And then I've been brought in as a guest at WCCA TV in Worcester, Massachusetts. And the station manager reached out this past year and said, hey, Cease, I think it's time you just have your own program. So now every couple of weeks I go into the studio and I invite guests in, and I'll love to invite Deborah Green in to teach us more about what she's doing in Hawaii. But we have doctors, we have scientists, we have environmentalists, we have citizens, far too many citizens who have been injured by this. So we do these 28-minute episodes every couple of weeks, and those are available out at WCCA TV as well. So thank you to our cable stations, because this is where the power lies. It's with you and I. No cavalry coming. It's you and I sharing in a calm, peaceful, professional way what the facts are. And we have so many resources in my slides to help you get there. Okay, so let's look at the science. So first we'll look at what the long-term science is telling us. Child and adult cancers. So for many years, the industry was able to spin it like, oh, there's no science. And what they knew is that cancers used to take a couple of decades to show up. Things were breaking down in the body, but weren't actually caught until decades later, which left the industry with a giant window to keep promoting all of their toxic infrastructure and devices. So child and adult cancers, way back 2 decades ago, there was enough known that the Food and Drug Administration commissioned a study with the National Toxicology Program, which is part of the National Institutes of Environmental Health Sciences. The National Toxicology Program is arguably the gold standard for toxics research in the world. This is the largest study they've ever done, $30 million. So they go in expecting, again, 2 decades ago, cell phones were the technology of the day, down around 1G, 2G, 3G, and those Gs just mean generation. About every 10 years, a new generation of technology comes out. So they start looking at these cell phones that were the tech of the day, expecting to find that they're okay. Well, 20 years later, when they wrapped up this study, they did an unprecedented 3-day peer review at the National Institutes of Health with world-leading scientists from all over the world whose life work is investigating microwaves. And in this report, they found clear evidence of cancerous tumors and DNA damage. Clear evidence is the highest of 5 categories they can assign. That should have triggered public policy to protect you and I. But we'll talk about the conflicts of interest in a little bit. DNA damage, as we know, our DNA is the roadmap to grow a proper anything, from a child to a plant to a pollinator to every living cell on the planet. Infertility, so it was actually when I read the infertility studies that I found my voice on this issue. I discovered that they've taken male human sperm, exposed it to a laptop with the antennas radiating, and it changed the DNA, it slowed the motility, and it caused apoptosis or programmed cell death. It was causing the sperm to die in just 4 hours of exposure to a laptop. And I went, you've got to be kidding me. My 2 daughters, my youngest had just gone into high school. So for Christmas, we thought we'd give her a leg up and we gave her a laptop. My oldest had just gone off to college with her MacBook. And of course, where is she using it but right on top of her reproductive organs? So that was the day I found my voice on this and started sharing the studies with my schools in my town and anybody I could get to look at this. So there are many more studies done on women's fertility, higher miscarriage rates for women who are exposing themselves to microwaves. And then neurotoxicity. So we are at a point in time where we are at epidemic levels of anxiety, depression. We are seeing suicidal ideation among children and adults like we have never seen before. And when we look at what our science is showing us, we see Dr. Hugh Taylor, who heads up the OB/GYN program at Yale Medical School. Dr. Taylor and his team did some of the rodent studies and saw that when you expose these pregnant mice, and we use these mice because what happens to them happens to humans. When Dr. Taylor and his team exposed these pregnant mice to radio frequency radiation from cell phones for, I think, 9 hours a day, they came out, the pups came out bouncing off the walls of the cage, much like a child with attention deficit disorder or attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. Not a care in the world, no focus, no concentration, just la, la, la. Dr. Martha Herbert founded the Autism Lab at Massachusetts General Hospital for research, and she sees huge connections among the families in her care and what we know scientifically happens to the brain when you expose it to microwave radiation. Alzheimer's, like cancer, used to take decades to come on. Now, instead of just seeing Alzheimer's in 70, 80, 90-year-olds, We are seeing it in 60-year-olds. We are seeing it in 50s, 40s, 30s. And in some rare cases, 20-year-olds are getting diagnosed with Alzheimer's. How long can we continue to pollute the environment of the brain and expect that we're going to be okay? We can't. So we're so grateful that because mainstream media has been hijacked by industry, when other groups who are working so hard for our environment start taking this issue on. As a mom, I first learned about the Environmental Working Group, or EWG, because they every year put out their fact sheets called the Clean 15 and the Dirty Dozen regarding pesticides on our food sources. So I knew about EWG, and now they've gotten funding. They've got a PhD working on wireless radiation. And so these are good fact sheets to share, which you can get here. They've got one about protecting kids from wireless radiation in school and at home. And then they've got another one about the neurotoxicity on the brain and the central nervous system. So again, all these are accessible through the links in my slides that we'll share with you. But some people know about the Environmental Working Group. They already come with credibility, so those are good resources to share. And then we have got to protect our kids. They are not just little adults. Biologically, they are still under construction. Their central nervous system, their immune system, and we know that this radiation hits the immune system and the nervous system especially hard. And with great thanks to Dr. Om Gandhi and other scientists, they have done this modeling. So these are head models turned sideways. The little yellow dot is the ear. So when we put our cell phone up to our head, that radiation is pummeling our brain about a third of the way through. On a 10-year-old child, it is penetrating into that child's brain about 3/4 of the way. And on a 5-year-old child, that is permeating almost the entire brain of that child. And a couple reasons why children's heads are more vulnerable than you and I is that their skulls are not fully formed yet. So more radiation's getting through, and their brain has a higher water content, and the water molecules and the radiation just jam on together in there. So we've got to protect our kids. Next, we'll look at the short-term effects, and a lot of people start to recognize these symptoms among themselves or their loved ones or their colleagues or the children of a friend, or it just goes on and on. But the good news is once we start taking charge of how we use technology, time and again, people will come back and say, Cece, gosh, I didn't want to know about this issue. I certainly didn't want to hear about it. But I recognized a lot of what you outlined, and I took a chance, and I just, as a first step, created a sleep sanctuary and got rid of all the wireless in my sleeping hours. And lo and behold, a lot of these crazy symptoms started going away. So let's talk about some of the more common ones. Please know that the Americans with Disabilities Act has long since recognized electromagnetic sensitivities, just like they recognize multiple chemical sensitivities. Sometimes these diseases go hand in hand because our poor biological cells only have so much energy, and they can't fix and repair the damage from multiple sources. So we see this domino effect starting to happen when we get hit with mold, or when we get hit with chemicals in our food or in the environment, and then all this pulsation of microwaves. So good to know that the ADA recognizes it. They have not put any teeth behind it yet. But insomnia is huge today. It used to be that sleeping is what kids and teenagers did best. And now a lot of kids don't sleep well, or adults, because we've got all this pulsation of microwave happening while we're supposed to be sleeping. And again, for years, the industry spun it that, oh, there's no mechanism of harm known, so let's just keep doing what we're doing. Well, now we know many different mechanisms of harm. And what Dr. Palpatcher and other scientists discovered is that we have something called the blood-brain barrier. It's a membrane around our brain. We have gut-brain barriers too. These barriers are meant to protect sensitive areas in our body. And what the science with Dr. Patcher showed is that when we pulse or jackhammer our brain with microwaves, it permeates or opens up that blood-brain barrier. So now where we used to have the safety of our blood escorting toxins out from everyday cell repair and regeneration, that blood that's got toxins in it can now take a left turn and go right into the brain and cause all sorts of neurotoxicity. Another thing that we know that happens with the brain has to do with the pineal gland and melatonin. And I'm not a doctor or a scientist, so that's about as technical as I'll get. But we are beings of light. That means that we have our 24-hour clock with our circadian rhythm, and we do different things with different organs all the way around that 24-hour cycle. In the wee hours of darkness, our pineal gland releases melatonin. Melatonin goes in and regulates our sleep cycle and also helps to escort those toxins out of our body. What happens when we leave this invisible man-made light energy form on? You and I can't see it with our eyes, but our brain sure as heck knows it's going over there, going all night long. So the brain's going, oh, the lights are on. Lights are on, lights are on. When's it going to get dark? When can I release the melatonin? And if we don't have that melatonin, we start seeing this whole cascade of health complications. So insomnia, headaches, nosebleeds, ear bleeds even, chronic fatigue, pain from unidentified sources. There's another mechanism of harm called the rouleau effect. In my little brain, I equate it to that candy before I stopped eating junk food. I still do a little bit, but not as much. Rolos, remember the caramel chocolates that are stacked up like that in a little tube? That's kind of like the rouleau effect. So our red blood cells are meant to be free floating and bringing oxygen to all of our bodily systems and organs. That's how we operate. When we are exposing ourselves to these electromagnetic fields, we see that it deforms our red blood cells. They start looking like little bottle caps instead of looking like these nice oval or round shapes. And then they start glomming together, they're magnetizing, and they start stacking up like a roll of coins or the Rolo candies. And then that stack can't navigate to where it needs to go to bring oxygen to our brain, to our heart, to our lungs, to our skin, to our gut, to every system in our body needs that oxygen. So we start finding oxidative stress. And as your doctor will tell you, oxidative stress is a precursor to just about every chronic illness. So that's one mechanism of harm. And then our skin, our largest organ, just like the birds and the bees, we have our own navigational stuff going on. We have like little antennas in the surface of our skin that help us to safely navigate throughout our world. It's those little skin antennas that are saying, whoa, it's too cold, you better go bundle up, or geez, it's too hot, you're going to overheat, you better go take care of that. We have these little antennas in the surface of our skin, and when we jackhammer ourselves with microwaves, we start seeing people who talk about maybe the hot ear. A lot of people get that when they are on their phone for a long time and it starts to burn. They start getting skin rashes, flushing, heating, tingling. There's a wonderful gentleman in the town next door here who he figured it out because the nerves in his leg were going jiggity. And he went to the doctors, ran the test, couldn't figure it out, starts doing his own research. What could make my legs start doing this? And lo and behold, he kept his cell phone right there. And it was starting to damage the nerves in his legs. He removed the cell phone, he hardwired his house, and Chuck's fine. So lots of things happening that nobody would ever connect the dots to it. You know, our major organs, our heart, too fast, too slow, depending on your own body's individual proclivity. That's why we do EEGs and EKGs to measure the electrical circuitry. And when we are overpowered by this man-made energy form, our organs oftentimes start doing some pretty awful things. The cognitive impairment where we can't think straight, anger and behavior issues, the anxiety, depression, suicidal ideation. One of the most heartbreaking things that I learned at the EMF medical conference is our doctors are telling us if we don't get ahead of this, we can expect many more of these societal outbursts because this radiation is changing the gray matter and the white matter of the brain in the areas where we would make reasoned decisions. What happens when you damage that? Mass shootings, when the kids were let back in the schools with all of their tablets, 3 different school districts in Boston were on the news because the children were literally beating on one another with their Chromebooks and their tablets. Like they can't control themselves. They're wailing on the, like, you've got to be kidding. And I was at the gym and I sparked up a conversation with a woman who's a mental health teacher in one of the high schools in here. And she said, oh my gosh, one of my colleagues is out on disability because one of the kids beat her up with his tablet. So this is happening in real time. And if you and I don't do something about it, it's not going to get done. So, and it's not just you and I, as I mentioned, it's every biological cell on the planet gets overpowered and dysregulated by these man-made energies. So the pollinators and the bees and the birds, and they've all got, you know, like magnetite in their beaks or crystals in their brain that help them to stay synchronized with the Earth's electromagnetic field. That's how they navigate. That's how they come and go. That's how they run their little world, our big world. And then we have this whole layer of electropollution that's been introduced that's dysregulating their ability to go to and fro and bring things back to the hive. And we depend on them for our food sources. Energy consumption. For those who are tuning in to climate change, one of the dark secrets of this industry is back in 2012, there was a Greenpeace analyst who looked at the energy consumption from the technology sector and said that if the cloud were a country, it would be the 5th largest consumer of energy in the world. And that was 12 years ago. And look at everything we've allowed in since then. So Katie Singer is another colleague who tracks down the cradle to grave life cycle of all of our technology. And she teaches about the horrors that are happening down in the Congo and elsewhere to extract the dozens of minerals that go into each one of our devices. If we really understood the human toll and the environmental toll, we would never just go buy this new cool gadget that the industry is pushing at us. We would use every single device till the full end of its useful life and then recycle it and make sure all that doesn't just go into a landfill somewhere. All the data warehouses, the networks, our personal devices. Streaming consumes huge amounts of energy. Every time we send and receive, every time we charge and recharge and recharge and recharge our devices every single day, we are consuming vast quantities of data. And then all these sexy apps that we've been talked into, cool apps, fun things, all of that is continuously updating in the background. So these are things we can now take charge of. We can choose not to use wireless services except for in emergencies and get mindful about what we do have going on and start reducing what we can. So when I was investigating all of this, I kept thinking in my naivete that surely somebody's got our backs on this, right? And if this is as bad as little me can just go look and find, somebody's looking out for us, right? Then in 2015, Harvard Law School Center for Ethics came out with this incredible free online report called Captured Agency: How the Federal Communications Commission is dominated by the industries it presumably regulates. And I love the graphic that they chose for the cover of their report. It's a revolving door. And that's what most of our federal agencies have become. We used to have scientists who worked on this issue. And when that Telecom Act of 1996 came into fruition, all those programs were defunded. And now all those scientists have long since retired or passed on. So Captured Agency lays it on the line and says, there's nobody up there looking out for us. They are looking out for industry, not the public. And more recently, ProPublica, a year or so ago, did an excellent article on how the FCC shields the cell phone companies from safety. And then remember that $30 million study that our National Toxicology Program completed that showed clear evidence of cancers and DNA damage that should have translated into public policy? Well, there's a different gentleman in charge of radiation control at the FDA today. This Dr. Jeffrey Shuren went over to the FCC and said, we don't really believe that study. Let's just keep doing what we're doing. And one might say, what would possess Dr. Shuren to do that? Well, you don't have to look very far to discover that his wife is a partner in a law firm that represents these big polluting industries, including telecom. So we have conflicts of interest all the way up to the top at the World Health Organization. If you do a quick search on World Health Organization, is Wi-Fi safe? You will find things that say, gee, the science is inconclusive. Look at the dates on everything, because how would you know that they have a current investigation going on because of that National Toxicology Program study? And because right on the heels of that, Italy came out with a large study, multi-million dollars, on cell phone towers that concluded the same things that we found: the cancers, the DNA damage, and more. But you'll be hard pressed to find it, but you can get it through this link here. So unfortunately, there are two groups at the World Health Organization. One is highly qualified scientists whose life's work revolves around investigating microwave radiation. And then there's the industry-backed group that seems to capture everything at the WHO. So we suspect that investigation is getting stacked with industry again. But here it is, electromagnetic fields. There's 10 different angles that they're looking at, from the cancers to the electrohypersensitivity to the impact on children, the environment, and so on. So, but again, they will drag this out as long as they can. So we need to help fix it today from where we are. So guys, thank you for your courage to listen to all the bad news. Let's focus on the good news, okay? I'll walk you through what you can do physically in your own space to control the things that are under your control. On the back of your router, the bottom of your router, you will find that there are Ethernet ports. Get a really long Ethernet cable and run it to where you use your technology in your house. You may be surprised to find you've already got Ethernet jacks in the wall. All you got to do is plug things back in. Your electrician can come in and put Ethernet ports in whatever room you use your technology. We did it crudely at first. My daughter, who was in college, would come home on break, and she's an adult. We never let our kids have tech in the bedrooms when they were kids, but she's an adult now. And so we literally have an Ethernet port in our living room. We got a long Ethernet cable and just threw it up the wall, outside of the wall, like hanging down in the wall, and just threw it in through the air conditioning vent in her bedroom. And then, so again, it's Ethernet cables. It's not rocket science. I had a box of these in my basement that we just never got rid of. So you might still have some of this stuff kicking around too. So an Ethernet cable, if you have to buy a new one, you might just want to spend the extra couple of dollars and get one that says shielded. It will have the little foil liner around the wires inside the plastic tubing here. And that will protect the dirty electricity from getting near your body too. So Ethernet cable And who knew? There are little adapters you can get. This is the one for the iPhone. It's the Lightning to RJ45 Ethernet adapter. Just look up your own make and model, and there are adapters for most devices. And you just plug it in, plug one end in to the router, plug the other end in to your adapter, and then plug it into your device. Not rocket science to fix. And then most people have multiple devices today. So there's something like an extension cord for electronics. It's called an Ethernet switch. This little one plugs into electricity, and then you just plug in the main cable from your router, plug it into one of these little ports, and then get as many Ethernet cables as you need for your devices. So this is like a splitter. And each one of these holes gives you a direct connection to the internet. So you're not competing for bandwidth and stuff as you do with Wi-Fi today. So I'm telling you folks, wired technology is so superior on every single criteria: safety, security, privacy. So much better going through a wire than flying out in the air where anybody can hack into you. Environmental, sustainability, energy consumption, all of it, hands down, far superior with a wired connection. The one thing you do have to give a little bit up is convenience, because you can't just take your wireless device and go everywhere if it's tethered to a cable, right? For me, no brainer. Everything in my house is hardwired. I almost never use my cell phone except for emergencies on the go. And you can forward your cell phone to a landline. And I know a lot of people got talked into giving up their landlines. I called Verizon the other day and said, how much is it just to reactivate the landline? $20 a month. Maybe you can afford that. And then in your settings on your phone, you can just forward your cell phone calls. So this was meant to be mobile technology. When we're not on the go, there's no reason why we should be radiating ourselves. So the first step is to just start plugging things in, right? The second step is to go into your devices, into your settings, and turn off the cellular and the data, the Wi-Fi, the Bluetooth, the locator, the hotspot, the 5G antennas, the SIMs, texting, whatever. But because there's so many in there, it's easy. Like my printer wound up having 3 antennas in it. I didn't know. The little glow plate only was connected to one of those antennas, but it was still radiating. I just went and found the manual online and figured out how to go into settings and turn off the other antennas. But you really need to measure. So see if you can, if you're fortunate to be able to pay. This is $400. There are some in the $200 range that people like to. I just like teaching with this one because it's easy. It goes green, yellow, red. So you really need a meter, and without it, with the 5G and the Internet of Things, they want to put one of these or more of these antennas in every single product you buy, so they can harvest your data and sell you product or use it for other privacy infringement reasons. So that's what it looks like. Hardwire, turn off the antennas, and measure. Okay. We have colleagues who go in with their friends and neighbors and they purchase one and just share it amongst themselves. You could get one through your library or just purchase one outright. Okay. So most of my presentation has been up to this point to talk about what this technology is and what the risks are, and how you can take control of the things that are under your control. Unfortunately, there are more and more exposures that are not necessarily under your control. And the first of those is the utility meters. When I was a little kid, I'm one of 10 kids. And so when we play hide and seek, it could be a while before you got found. So I'd be outside hiding in the bushes and I would sit there and just watch the little dials go around on our utility meters. That's how they were tracking how much usage we had for our billing purposes. Then the industry came in and said, hey, town, we can save you some money. We can use wireless technology. And the first phase was they would put a meter on your home that has a wireless transmitter on it for gas, electric, water, solar, propane. And then instead of having to pay a town employee to walk the neighborhoods and get all the readings for the billing, you can now have your employee in a truck with a scanner that'll drive by and just point at every house and get the billing information. Much quicker, it'll save you money. What town wouldn't think that's a great idea? Unfortunately, that was a bad idea because these transmitters that they put on the meters are not safe. And then the next phase that they did was the smart grid, where they start hooking up house to house to house to house, all these transmissions going up to a collection point that they then send all the aggregate data off to the utility company. But there are other risks involved here. So each one of these transmitting antennas pulse this radiation continuously. And again, one of the properties of this radiation is it likes metal and it amplifies on metal. So this radiation can now hop onto the wires and the pipes of your home, travel all over that, creating a giant antenna that you now live inside. Far too many reports of improper installations with grounding, fires, explosions. And it's important to note that the fire department can't just show up and hose it down. Anytime there's an electrical fire, that could cause them to become electrocuted. So first they have to get to the electric company and get them from their central operations to turn off the electricity before the firefighters can do their job. That can take upwards of an hour, in which time, if it's a breezy day, you could have the whole neighborhood going up in flames. So these smart meters are terrible, terrible for our communities. Then there's all the data harvesting and the privacy issues. And this was another leading cause of sudden onset microwave sickness that the doctors were telling us about. When these smart meters go in, the cases of microwave sickness start rising. And this sadly is a huge environmental justice issue. These big toxic companies come into these underprivileged, minority, low-income communities where people aren't paying attention because they're working 2 or 3 jobs just to get food on the table and a roof over their heads. There could be language barriers. And these companies roll into town, do their pilot program and say, hey, it was successful here. So guess what? We're going to roll it out across your whole state. And hey, New York, and hey, Connecticut, hey, Rhode Island, look how successful we were in Massachusetts, in Worcester. We're going to roll it out for your country, everybody. So it's a nightmare. And our towns don't know. And they give all these financial incentives to come into town. And so we have to educate. Jeremy Johnson has a really good TED Talk. They're usually just 15 minutes. He was a Silicon Valley engineer, married to a medical doctor. He and his wife both got really sick, really suddenly. Nothing in her training could figure it out. And they finally pinpointed it to when a bank of smart meters went in on their condo. So Jeremy's got a really good TED Talk, because our engineers have only been taught you have to have heat from a device to have harm. Well, that heat threshold is what we're stuck with right now, and the harm is happening at hundreds of thousands of times below that. So for anybody in your life who's an engineer who thinks, oh, tinfoil hat conspiracy theorist, point them to Jeremy. Dr. Alexia McKnight works with radiation for her livelihood. She's a veterinarian radiologist. She had no idea about the low, non-thermal, non-ionizing levels of radiation that were getting taken down by until a smart meter showed up at her house. She got so neurotoxic that she could not remember while driving out in traffic if that green light meant stop or go. It was a 50-50 proposition, and thank goodness she made the right choice and got home safely. So she did a TED Talk about her experience as a doctor on how sick she got from a smart meter. So our own devices, the utility meters, and then the cell towers, they started in industrial parks 300 feet up in the air. And then they started encroaching closer and closer and convinced our towns that, hey, if we can paint it the same color as your building, then it's perfectly fine and we'll give you a kickback. So there's a revenue stream for putting this equipment in to private property owners, to our towns, our municipalities, and they think it's a really good win-win situation. It's not. It's really bad. The closer it is, the worse it is. So you can go and look at the non-industry funded science that's telling us we've done scientific studies. They're called epidemiological studies to tell us what's actually happening out in the world. And what they've determined is there's this neurotoxicity and death curve that starts to come down around 500 meters, which is 1,640 feet. Within that, we see higher death rates and neurotoxicity rates and insomnia and headaches and, all of that. It starts coming down at that 500-meter mark. It doesn't actually catch up to general population statistics till double that. So 1,000 meters or 3,000 plus feet, we should never have these cell towers near us. So you can look at the science. This is what my personal research repository looks like. I didn't understand EMFs, so I called it Understanding EMFs. And then as a tech writer, as I found important resources, I just started logging them in. So no bells and whistles, but very quickly skimmable to help you find facts that you may want to share. So there's a whole navigation panel. All of this is linked on my resources page at Massachusetts for Safe Technology. So it's critically important to know what the non-industry funded science is telling us. And then anybody in the US can go to antennasearch.com and type in any address, and it will give you a return of a 3-mile radius from that address on how many cell towers and big macro cell antennas are mounted in that 3-mile radius. I did my home, and there's a couple hundred of them. I did downtown Boston at our State House. There were 1,520 towers and more than 4,500 of these giant antennas. And these things pulse microwave radiation for miles. This is what one of the Boston neighborhoods looks like with these cell towers. And we wonder why people are getting so sick. And now we add the 5G small cells. So again, the G in this instance just means generation. This is the 5th big rollout of new technology. And Deborah actually did a really wonderful short video that says what is 5G and what isn't 5G. So when you get my slides, you can look at this, and she does a really great short video on this. But the industry is spinning it up that this new technology is going to give us really fast download speeds for our entertainment purposes, smart cities, superhighways. It all sounds so cool until you see what's really going on biologically, and then look to see they are buying up the entertainment industry. This is their next revenue stream. So we're being sold a bill of goods. And it's not like 5G is just going to come in and replace everything that's already mounted all over our communities. Everything that's already there, the 3rd and 4th generation antennas, that's the backbone for 5G. So right now, the 3rd and 4th generation uses these really long wavelengths that can penetrate into our living spaces, our offices, our churches, our schools. But all that's left to monetize are these tiny little millimeter waves, and they get disrupted very easily by anything in the path. So trees or rain or snow can degrade the quality of the signal. So the industry solution is to put millions of these small cells right up front, close and personal. Literally, they are putting cell towers at the curb at bedroom height every 2 to 12 houses inside our neighborhoods. And here's some examples from our friends at Americans for Responsible Technology. So you can start looking for these canisters and then go talk to your town about what they are. We have reports of industry literally coming in the darkness of night and just lopping off the trees at a time when we're facing climate change and our towns are putting forth programs to grow more trees, to create a canopy to cool our cities and towns. And here comes the industry just chopping them down so their awful 5G signals can get through to your devices. This was never safety tested. Senator Richard Blumenthal from Connecticut in Washington, D.C. was at a congressional hearing with the Commerce Committee and said to these two industry leaders, so please share with us, how much money has your industry invested in ensuring this is safe before bringing it to market? And the two industry guys did their typical hamina, 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 and then ultimately had to admit that they have never funded any independent science to prove that this was safe. So this is a wonderful little 3 or 4 minute clip that our friends at Environmental Health Trust provide of that congressional hearing, of the industry admitting, we don't think it's safe. And then even some of the industry magazines like Computer World are saying 5G is a bad joke. They're spinning it up, but it's not actually giving us anything better than what we already had speed-wise with 4G, which is bad enough. And there went Verizon last year, 2 years now, boasting 100 million people are going to have access to 5G on our network, right? So this paper, I point out, it can get you into some hot water. It did with me, with my state representative. He had a bill that he sponsored for me. And then he said, the next session, I'm not going to sponsor that bill. And I ran into him at our farmer's market. And I said, Jack, Representative Jack Lewis, I said, Jack, where did I lose luck with you? Because I interviewed him when he was running for office, and he is sharp. He is smart. He was asking excellent questions. I said, where did I lose luck? And he said, when you talked about COVID-19. So I sent him this study and I said, Jack, we are not saying that COVID-19 was caused by 5G. What we are saying is that biologically, our cells only have so much energy to keep our immune system strong. When you have an environmental pollutant like 5G, and then you have a virus come in on top of that, our bodies get overwhelmed and we wind up sick or dead. That's what this study shows us. And for those who are in the scientific and medical community, you will know that in a credible journal, before they publish your studies, you have to go through something called peer review. And that means that other experts on this subject look at your science and make sure it was done according to good science. And so usually you might have 2 or 3 peer review people in there. For this paper with Dr. Rob Brown and Beverly Rubik, they had 15 or 16 peer reviews on this paper to make sure it was rock solid before it got published, because they knew industry was going to try and take it down. So this is really important. In the areas where we have high radio frequency exposures, we had higher cases and higher death rates of COVID-19. So one of the things that Dr. Magda Havas recognizes, now Dr. Havas is the co-chair of the EMF Medical Conference, and she's also a professor emeritus, which means she retired with honors from Trent University up in Canada, where she taught electromagnetic fields for 25 years. She recognizes that our governments have by and large dropped the ball, and they are not monitoring this cumulative radiation exposure. So she has set up this global EMF monitoring project that she works on when she has time. And she is inviting you and I to be citizen scientists, to be the boots on the ground. And with the Safe and Sound Pro 2 meter, because you have to have the same scientific instrument, anybody who wants to be a citizen scientist can reach out to her at globalemf.net. And there is a code that they can give you for a discount. I think this runs for $400. I think I paid like $308 with the discount. And I want to have a good meter because it's all around us and I want to know what my exposures are. So she has what she nicknamed her brag project. Can you brag about the radiation exposures in your community? Are you in the blackout zone where it's very high? Are you in the red high zone? Are you in the amber zone or the green zone? And again, we can't kid ourselves. There is no safe level of man-made radiation in the scientific literature. So we want to get to as low as reasonably achievable. That ALARA, as low as reasonably achievable, is called the ALARA principle. And our Centers for Disease Control, the CDC, already uses that for the ionizing radiation, the X-rays, the high levels of man-made stuff, the sun. And they say 3 prongs. Spend as little amount of time radiating yourself as you can. So time, create as much distance from anything that's radiating as you can. And if you can't get away from it, you should shield. And we'll give you some resources for people to contact on shielding. So anybody who wants to be a citizen scientist, she's got great little protocols. She'll give you a sheet to put on your clipboard and grab a buddy so one can measure and one can write down. But she's having people measure, what are our exposures looking like? And then she'll do some things on indoor exposures and new cars. So lots of little projects we can contribute to if you're so inclined. Those outdoor measurements, outdoors, if we could be at 100,000 or less ambient, but not really like hanging out underneath it, then if we had a clean space at home and could do proper cell repair and regeneration at night, we could probably do okay at 1,000 microwatts per square meter less outdoors. One of our colleagues in New Hampshire measured her fire department. It was in the green. In Keene, New Hampshire, it was inching up toward the yellow. And we now know since then that they have put 5G small cells at the curb. So we suspect they are into the black or red now. Concord, New Hampshire, already in the red during the pandemic when almost nobody was around. It was like a ghost town. And even just the ambient radiation was already that high. Right in Stratham, New Hampshire, which is where Deb Hodgson lives. She's the impetus behind the incredible work in New Hampshire. We'll share that with you momentarily. They put a giant cell tower right on their main drag, so it's blackout. Here in Boston, we have this wonderful North End, which is where all of our amazing Italian restaurants and bakeries are. And it's a huge tourist attraction. And this pretty little street light right at the curb where all these tourists go all day, all night, that's a cell tower. That's a 5G small cell made to look pretty. And above all these wonderful restaurants are homes. So these people have these cell towers at the curb right outside their home. And that's what's happening in all of our major cities today. So Deborah, as she mentioned, had gotten citizens out to take measurements and they have logged them in. I was horrified. I went through high school in Hawaii and they actually took readings in my little town of Wailua on Oahu, and it's off the charts with the cell towers that have gone up since I left. So my heart just breaks for my old neighborhood there. But you can go see what she's got for Maui, the big island of Hawaii, Kauai, and Oahu. So yeah, so guys, that's all the bad news. And I know it's a lot. I know it's like drinking water out of a fire hose when you first learn about this issue, but let's get it out there and then start thinking about baby steps of what we can do and take inspiration from somebody like Martin Luther King Jr. He taught us when we have something really wrong societally, we can fix it. And it goes through 3 channels. One, the public engages, and that's what we're hoping to inspire with these free education webinars that we do twice a month. Eventually, it gets taken through the courts, and there's a lot to report on here. And then in the end, public policy catches up, in this case, to the science. So we'll leave it to you to be able to dig through my slides and look at the things that intrigue you most. But we'll whip through them quickly in the next 10 minutes and just show you what's there so you know what you might want to look at. First, we'll look at the legal solutions. And when that Dr. Shuren went over to the FCC and said, oh, we don't believe that $30 million study, let's keep doing what we're doing, the FCC took that advice and put a formal ruling in something called the Federal Register that said, we don't believe we have to update our federal radiation exposure limits. Well, meanwhile, there had been a docket open at the FCC, or a file was open for 6 years, into which scientists, doctors, citizens, advocates, people who are sick from this, people who lost their loved ones from it, all of this evidence of harm went into this public record, and the FCC completely blew it off. And they made their determination that they didn't have to change anything. So once their ruling went into the Federal Register, then the lawsuits could begin. The Environmental Health Trust sued, Children's Health Defense sued, and a number of other parties across the country sued. All those lawsuits got combined into what was called the Environmental Health Trust versus the Federal Communications Commission. And, citizens donated to help these lawsuits. And, that's another way we can all help if we can. Donate what you can to the groups that are working so hard on this, because it costs them like $15,000 just to get the information out of the public record, organized and put in such a way that they could then present the judges with 11,000 pages of organized evidence of harm. Literally 27 fat binders full of evidence of harm. So the judges are looking at this, and they go to the attorneys for the FCC and say, so please share with us, where's your homework on how did you determine you're going to stick with these 1996 radiation limits? And the FCC just said, the FDA said it was okay. So the judges, of course, asked, where is the FDA's homework? And they have none. Not one of our federal agencies has done the research on this. So we have a huge regulatory gap. So the lawsuit was won, and the court remanded, which sadly just means they sent it back to the Fox Watch and the Hen House. They remanded it back to the FCC to account for impacts on children, to account for electromagnetic illnesses, to account for the elderly, to account for the environment. And it's now been more than 2 years, and the FCC has not responded to the court order. This is typical from what we understand. The courts do not like to tell our federal agencies what to do. They like to tell them to get it done, but they didn't give them a deadline. So from what we understand from the attorneys is it takes 4 or 5 years for all of this to play out, which means it's probably still a couple more years. So there's no cavalry coming. We have got to take care of this at the local and the municipal level and the state level. So many other lawsuits happening. This lawsuit this cell tower that went up on the neighborhood in Pittsfield, Massachusetts, the neighborhood is called Shacktown. And literally for the first time in the United States, after a year and a half of these neighbors bringing the facts to their town, the mayor and the city council ordered their Board of Health to investigate. The Board of Health investigated for a year and wrote a cease and desist emergency order to Verizon. Come to the table, let's figure this out. Verizon instead at the 11th hour went to the courts and got an injunction against the Board of Health. And so the Board of Health believes that even though the Telecom Act says you can't claim any harm from environmental impact, the Board of Health consulted with attorneys at the state level health agency or health association, and they believe that that telecom law only applies to the application process and the siting of that toxic infrastructure. Once it goes live in a community, the health agents are legally responsible for getting rid of that nuisance or pollutant. So there is a lawsuit with great thanks to Children's Health Defense that's representing Pittsfield citizens to sue the town to get them to remove that injunction because the town bullied their own Board of Health and would not support them with the funding to take this to court. So we are waiting in the coming months to see if that injunction will get removed so that Board of Health can do its job. And that will set a precedent for our country. And again, we don't hold our breath on anything, but that is one of the best documents to share locally with your own towns, because that cease and desist order is powerful. Okay, so lots of other lawsuits happening all over the country. So we talked about the courts. Now we'll spend a minute talking about policy solutions. I mentioned that we've had bills here in Massachusetts for a decade. We've gotten some out of committee, but nothing passed into law. We will be doing an action item in the coming weeks to see if we can get our 6 bills moving this session. But the best that we have is we had these same conversations with Representative Patrick Abrami in New Hampshire, who I understand is now running for Senate. His constituent, Deb Hodgson, who has hosted a number of these monthly forums with us, she got so sick, and it turned out to be the Wi-Fi in her own home. Everything from her blood clotting to headaches to nosebleeds to nausea to dizziness to anxiety to cognitive impairment, where she's lived in her town for 40 years and couldn't remember where she was going. All of it cleared up when she got rid of the wireless, and the plant in her kitchen that just sat there shot up 2 feet, 15 inches in just a couple of months after removing the wireless. That's what convinced her husband and kids that she wasn't crazy, was that plant thrived after she removed it, and so did she. So Deb introduced me to Rep. Abrami. They got in his car, came down to my house in Massachusetts. We sat at my kitchen table for the afternoon, and he'd already begun his investigation. He's an engineer and had only been taught you have to have heat from these devices to have harm. He learned about the non-thermal, non-ionizing radiation impacts and beefed up his bill to say, why have Lloyd's of London, Swiss Re, AM Best, and others long since recognized this is a world leading risk, and they put exclusions in their policies. They don't cover for damages from radio frequency radiation. That can leave our towns left holding the bag unless we brought it to our town's attention that our local zoning bylaws needs to make sure that we've got good insurance coverage on this. We talked about the fine print. What is that? Does it even exist right in our own devices? And why is the FCC ignoring thousands of peer-reviewed studies and not accounting for the non-thermal, non-ionizing radiation biological effects? Why does our country allow 100 times more radiation than certain other countries do? Well, because we make all this stuff here. And why is nobody looking at the cumulative effect as we add layer upon layer upon layer? Because the damage is cumulative. The longer we choose to leave ourselves exposed, the greater the risk we're going to hit trouble. So we got this law passed in 7 months in New Hampshire, and we can talk more about that later. But they came out with this groundbreaking report. It's with great thanks to Deb Hodgson, who took the minutes for all their meetings. Most of this report is the meeting minutes. So it's a transparent process with all the experts they brought in. And in the appendix, you'll also find the science. The first 17 pages, and it's in pretty big print, so it's not hard to read. They call out the corruption with our federal government and the agencies, and they make 15 recommendations for what all of our towns should be doing to protect our children, to go back to hardwired schools and public buildings. And this, along with that emergency order from Pittsfield, are probably the 2 strongest documents. I paid $50 to get this printed at Staples, but when I'm talking to anybody about this, this is powerful to have on hand. So we thought we were doing great. Dr. Kent Chamberlain from the University of New Hampshire was the chair of the Computer and Electrical Engineering Department. He was assigned to this commission. Thought, of course, Wi-Fi is fine. I've been doing medical devices for years. And he did a complete 180 when he saw the science. So now Dr. Chamberlain is retired, and he is working with our world-leading experts on this to try and get our communities to stop inviting this technology in. So great resources, videos, slides, We did another bill to start enacting some of the recommendations, and at every turn, the industry get in and they torpedoed our efforts. But again, really credible information. Frank Clegg from Microsoft Canada sent in his testimony. And this is such a powerful statement. Wireless technology is no longer advanced technology. It's outlived its useful life as a main source of connectivity. We need to get back to wiring our communities. And Deborah has incredible information about their successful battle against a test drone, a giant, like, what was it, 2 football field size drone. They were just going to hover over their island and radiate. So we have got to stop looking to wireless and start hardwiring. So these bills have been going. There's more being introduced in 2024. Maine caught on, a nurse up there who is a legislator. She introduced a really good bill. Connecticut, Rep. David Michel has introduced legislation. We have all of our bills here that we're hoping to get out of committee in the next month or two. But again, there's bills all over the country, and it takes the citizens speaking up before anything changes. So lots of inspiration. The industry rolls into town and says, oh, you know, here's an application. It's great. You're going to get a kickback. And if anybody says anything about, oh, you know, could it be harmful? Those are just the NIMBYs. They're not in my backyard, people. Nobody else cares. Well, that's simply not true. If you go to Americans for Responsible Technology, you'll see there are more than 150 groups that have been working on this for a long time. So, you know, poke around. If anything that we've done here is helpful, just know that there are now samples that you can use where Americans for Responsible Technology has taken the best of the best and put it into sample zoning code for your town. Checklists. You can say, here's our code, here's a checklist. Where do we fall short and what can we do? So lots and lots of great inspirational resources. Because education was brought into Stamford, Connecticut recently, their town voted against this plan that the governor and industry had cobbled together for their top 5 largest towns. They just wanted them to say, okay, sure, bring it in, put these small cells at the curb outside people's homes. Well, we got the education in there. And then their town said, no, thank you, we don't want that plan. So it can be done. A grandmother in Easton, Connecticut figured it out. She went to her town. There was a doctor on one of their boards. He figured it out. And now they put a moratorium on 5G, and they've re-upped their moratorium twice now until it can be proven safe. And here's Deborah's ban with Hawaii County as well. So this is happening all over the world. We just never hear about it, so we don't feel empowered to do anything. So we could do a whole nother program on schools, but Louisiana and a band of doctors there just got a unanimous bill passed to start striking the balance away from technology and back to what children really need to grow up healthy. They need movement. They need to be connected to nature. They need to be with the trusted adults in their environment, not in front of a screen, right? So best practices for digital devices, this just came out. News stories, the Netherlands, Finland, and others are taking technology out of the classroom because they know they got sold a bill of goods. It is not helping children to develop and learn. New York Times did an expose, Silicon Valley executives sending their children to schools with no technology, not hardwired, not wireless, no technology. And then bless our friends, Patty and Doug Wood, who do Americans for Responsible Technology. They also set up a program called Tech Safe Schools with resources for you to give to your schools. And if you reach out to them, they will send a packet of information to help empower you, but you have to do the work. Massachusetts Association Breast Cancer Coalition has put together curriculum with experts, K through 12, curriculum for prevention on wireless. Dr. McKnight and I were brought into her Pennsylvania schools. We have a professional development curriculum already done. And here's our little course. We can train the entire school in about a half an hour. So Environmental Health Trust has posters, postcards, all sorts of resources to support you. And there are just so many, many resources for everybody. We are so grateful for this EMF Medical Conference that is now free and online. And now, with great thanks to Dr. Panagopoulos out of Greece, the first medical school textbook has now been published with chapters from experts all over the world, medical school training. And Dr. Cindy Russell and others founded Physicians for Safe Technology, which is a highly credible place to send your own medical team to. And then there are many resources for our professionals, the physicists, engineers, technologists, architects, and you can explore that. For those who are do-it-yourselfers, there are videos, there are resources at Environmental Health Trust and elsewhere to teach you how to hardwire. For those who that brings terror down to the very bottom of your toes, hire an electrician. Have the electrician come in and help you put in the Ethernet ports and stuff. Or you can hire a building biologist who is highly certified and trained to address all the indoor pollutants from the mold and the water and the VOCs and the off-gassing and formaldehyde. And there are those who are electromagnetic radiation specialists. So you can go to the Building Biology Institute and hire help. This award-winning film, Generation Zapped, is now part of Amazon Prime, and most of our libraries have it in their online streaming services with Canopy and Hoopla. You can go and watch that with your loved ones. You don't have to be responsible for knowing everything. It's a great conversation starter. And then send people to one of our webinars and we'll tell you what's happened since the film came out in 2018. PBS has 2 episodes you can watch. And here's that toolkit for you from Americans for Responsible Technology with all the templates and stuff that you need. And remember, guys, we are the example for all the children in our world. Monkey see, monkey do is like their favorite game. If they see you in front of your screens all the time, you've just given them permission. So let's model good behavior. Here's a little poster that just reminds us how to connect meaningfully with ourselves, nature, our neighbors, our pets, do good things in our world, right? So let's model that. And you can get to that poster here. I keep it hung up next to me because I need to remember to get off my computer too. And then the Earth Prescription is written by Dr. Laura Conover. She's a medical doctor who is a big fan of grounding, huge body of science behind that. So our Earth pulses healing electron energy 7.83 times a second. That's something called Schumann's resonance. There was a scientist named Schumann who figured it out. Healing beautiful energy about 8 times a second. We got so fancy with our digital technology in the megahertz range. That means 1 million times per second, it's pulsating this microwave radiation at us. In the gigahertz range, 1 billion times per second, we're getting jackhammered with microwaves. So we are completely overpowering ourselves. So let's get back and connect with the Earth's natural electromagnetic field. And with that, she offers dozens of ways throughout every season because, you know, we can't all be walking around barefoot like Deborah gets to in Hawaii most of the year. But she teaches us how to ground naturally throughout every season. So lots of resources here for us, for our municipal leaders. And just remember to measure against biological effects, not those bogus levels that the industry gives us. So what can we do? Don't kid ourselves. There's no safe level. It will take us speaking up at the local and state level before anything really happens at the federal level. And Dr. Linda Birnbaum was the head chief scientist for our country of the National Institutes of Environmental Health Sciences. And she said, we really have to push it up from the bottom. There are still some good people at the federal level, but not enough to turn the tide. So let's keep educating. Come to our info sessions. Start where you are. I can be brought in to do presentations to your town, to your churches, your temples, you know, wherever people congregate. Let's just start telling the facts. So if you belong to professional associations, they're often looking for speakers too, and I would be honored to be referred. So all of our tech, tech is here to stay. We need to manage it. So we should all be having tech safety committees. Our town should know better than to put this toxic smart metering in and should at least offer a no-fee opt-out and then start transitioning to hardwired in public spaces. And we need to let our towns know that most of our town attorneys are no match for the wireless industry. We need to hire attorneys, especially special counsel, who are experts, and we can help you find those attorneys sometimes too. So for today, think about the steps you can take to reduce your own exposures. Just start noticing, where do I use technology? Start with baby steps, protect your sleep, eventually make your way into Ethernet cables and adapters, and keep your devices in airplane mode as often as you can. And you may need to go into your settings and look at your Bluetooth and Wi-Fi, because sometimes if you just hit airplane mode, it doesn't turn them all off. You need to make sure that the Wi-Fi and the Bluetooth say off. If they just say not connected, that means they're still shooting radiation to go, here I am, here I am, here I am. It's just not connected. So turn those antennas off and then use the resources that Environmental Health Trust and others have. Flyers, posters, just start help getting word out. So thank you, everybody. We know that was a lot. It was a packed 2 hours. You can reach Deborah at TechSafe Hawaii. There's her email address. You can reach me at Massachusetts for Safe Technology, and that's my email address. And again, for everybody who registered, we'll be converting this presentation to a video and sending that out in the coming days with these slides. So thank you so much. Deborah, has there been any activity in the chat that we should address?
There have been just a few questions, which I've actually responded to as the questions have come in.
Okay.
So I think if everybody has access to the chat.
Yeah, and for those who've never saved the chat, if you click on the chat option down in the bottom in your settings there, then you see at the bottom of the chat box, there's 3 dots. If you click on that, it gives you the option to save the chat to your computer. So anybody
sorry, I just want to quickly peruse and make sure everything got answered here. Oh, there was one question that I didn't know the answer to. Let me see if I can find it quickly here. Has to do with, okay, Mary Sue Sanderson was asking, where do we get the 6-part documentary to show at the library? And
okay.
I don't know the answer to that.
All right, so what you can do is go out to Massachusetts for Safe Technology on the resources page and click on any of those links in there that'll take you out to my research repository, and just do a search on library and our flyer will show up. Reach out to me because now there are other ones that we might swap out because that was done in 2015, 2016. We would definitely include Generation Zap today. And there's a few others that we might want to reconsider. So yeah, let us know how we can help.
And someone was asking about, is there a Wi-Fi on and off switch on the router? And, my response, which may bear sharing with everybody, is that some routers have that, but sadly, it's more and more rare to find a router that has a Wi-Fi on and off switch. And on our website, we have a link to a low EMF router that has a clear on and off switch, and it's a low EMF router that's intelligent enough to turn off the Wi-Fi when it's not being used. So you can go to our website, safetechhawaii.com, and on the menu bar, you can see the low EMF router option there. And I have a question, Cece. I shouldn't probably hog the time. Maybe you want to open it up to others
I don't have
first?
to be somewhere after this. So
Okay.
as long as people want to stay, I'm happy to answer questions.
So others, please be thinking about your questions. My question is about putting the Safe and Sound Pro 2 or similar type of meter into the libraries, because we have some meters that we've wanted to get into the libraries, but we haven't been meeting with very good response. So can you tell us, like, I mean, those are expensive meters, right? And so, I mean, does the
Yeah,
library take a deposit
they
so
do.
that it does come back? And for how long do you let people have the
Yeah, I
meter
think
out on loan and so forth?
yes, there is a form that they fill out. They have to leave a credit card number so that if it goes missing on their watch, it gets replaced. And I think they let it out for 1 week or 2 weeks, and it has to be brought back directly to our library. It can't be dropped off in one of the other library network boxes somewhere. Um, and I can share whatever paperwork I think we have on ours, if that would make it easier for you. And from my slides, you'll be able to, I think, click on the library systems that had it. And maybe that would be helpful to share with your library too.
Fantastic. Thank
Yeah,
you.
you're
Other
welcome.
questions from
You're
others?
welcome. Yeah, I wanted to add one other thing to the question about the router and being able to turn that off. In my home, what I did was I called up, oh no, I had one company. I think we had Verizon. And we were able to go in the rep, who I called it customer service. I said, I'm hardwiring my home. How do I turn off the radiating antennas inside that triple play box for TV, cable, internet? And it was down in my basement in the utility closet. And they said, oh, that's easy. Sit down at your computer. And I went, really? And he said, yeah. So I sit down at my computer and he walks me through how to get into my online account with Verizon. I thought, okay. And there it was, wireless settings. So I just had to go 2.4 gigahertz antenna off, 5 gigahertz antenna off. And then I waited for it to dissipate. And then I went down and I measured, and it was beautiful. It was literally radio silence, right? Well, then my husband sees a better deal come from Comcast Xfinity. And Steve is a financial planner, so his world makes sense in terms of dollars and cents, right? So he calls him up and says, I'm tempted to go with the deal you're offering, but my wife's going to want to make sure that by the time you're done doing the installations, we're not going to have any antennas radiating. The guy said, no problem. So the tech shows up, he installs, and I say, okay, just humor me. And I run down to the basement with him and my meter, and it's off the charts red. And I said, okay, so you turned off the 2.4 gigahertz antenna and the 5 gigahertz antenna, right? And he said, yeah. And I said, and somebody tipped me off that Comcast was using our home routers to throw signal out to the curb through hotspots from our thing that we're paying the electricity on. You guys are taking our signal and throwing it out to the curb so people driving by can stay connected. And I said, did you get the 2.4 gigahertz hotspot and the 5 gigahertz hotspot? Did you turn those off? And he said, yeah, I did. And I said, okay, so why is it still radiating? He says, I don't know. So he dug around for a while. He called tech support. They didn't know. He called his supervisor. They didn't know. And so he said, I'm going to bring my supervisor tomorrow and we're going to come back. And I said, okay. And then I remembered when I was at that EMF medical conference, I was sitting at a table at lunch and some colleagues were talking about this additional antenna. And I was talking to somebody else at the other end of the table, but it just caught my ear for a second. So I reached out and I said, hey, what was that fifth antenna I heard you guys talking about? And he said, oh, it's the wireless home security antenna. Whether you have a wireless home security system or not, they give you every antenna radiating full tilt, and tech support doesn't know about it. So you have to call tech support and ask for a tier 2 tech support person with Comcast that will get you to an engineer, and the engineer on their end can disable that. And I went, man, well, we don't play that game. So Steve was great. He went out that night and did me a solid and went and bought our own router. And so the next day when the technician and his supervisor came back to my home, I said, so did you guys figure it out? And they said, no. Why is it still radiating? And I said, well, I figured it out. it's that wireless home security thing. And I said, and listen, honestly, I don't want to take the chance that you guys are going to do an update overnight and this thing is going to start transmitting again. So we bought our own router as a show of good faith. Would you just install it for me? And he did. It was really nice. It's just plugging in wires. It wasn't a big deal. So you have to measure. And if you can get a hold of one of the routers that Deborah has identified, I think that that will be the way to go.
There are so many examples of this, Cece, of you can't trust what the technicians tell you or what anybody connected with those companies tells you. And it's not that they're purposefully lying, they just don't know.
Mhm.
And so it just points to how important it is to have your own meter
Yeah,
so that you can verify and make sure.
yeah,
And
that's
if somebody tells you, don't worry, yeah, it's off, you just can't trust it. So
no. And the utility companies routinely do that. They say, oh, these smart meters or these digital meters, they only pulse a couple seconds a day. Well, I was getting prepared to testify before the Massachusetts Department of Public Utilities. I took my meter into my dining room, and we do have solar panels on our home. Um, so we have a separate electric meter for solar and then our regular electric meter. Both of them are mounted on the wall outside of my dining room. So I sat there on the floor on the inside wall and I counted how many times did I get a spike of radiation. And when I did the math for a 24-hour period, 17,000 times a day. That pulses microwave radiation. And thankfully, it's on the room we use the least in our home. And I have tried to do some shielding around that. But, you know, that's a far cry away from, oh, just a couple seconds a day. If you
for
add it all
sure.
up, maybe in the
Yeah.
aggregate, that's it. But it's 17,000 times a day we're getting hit with microwaves.
On
So,
our website, safetechhawaii.com, on the resources page, I have a very short, like 5-minute video of some measurements that I took from a smart meter in Maui Meadows.
mhm.
And the thing is pinning the meter multiple times per minute.
Mhm.
So there's, yeah, there's lots of
Yeah, and
misinformation.
it's going to come from us having to put the pressure on to get the industry to do the right thing. And that just means connect these devices directly to the home's internet. They can get their readings for billing purposes and we'll know if there's a break in service and they need to, come fix something. So keep the good technology, but get rid of the radio frequency. That's our message. And Deborah, I love that you said having a meter in hand makes or breaks the conversation. What I do is I'll say, hey, do you by chance have an iPhone? It'll quickly help you frame up. A lot of people do, especially the kids today all have the iPhones. I go into settings, general, legal and regulatory, and show them that radio frequency disclaimer in there. And then it takes it from tinfoil hat conspiracy to, oh, I never knew. And then when you show them that radiation, then they might think more seriously. Yeah.
So we have another question in the chat. Someone says, I'm researching how to put panel on my side of a fence to protect from my neighbor's smart meter on the other side. Any resources you recommend? Metal blocks this type of microwave or wireless radiation. So the panel that you put up, should be metal. That would be my recommendation. Uh, Anything to add, Cece?
Yeah, just be careful, for the smart meter, sure, but make sure that you don't have other things radiating on your side of the fence that's going to hit that metal and bounce back and get you twice. So shielding needs to be done very thoughtfully because like if you shielded your house and then you're using your cell phone in the house, it's just I know somebody who got so sick. There are shielding paints and stuff you can buy that have metal fibers in it. She had a bank of smart meters installed right outside her kitchen and it took her down. I mean, she couldn't even live in her condo anymore. She was couch surfing, figured it out, and then thought, well, I know there's shielding paint. I'll just shield that. She shielded the whole side of that house, but didn't know enough that on the other side, her neighbors had their cordless phone, their cell phones, their laptops, their printers, everything. was still radiating in from the other side, hitting that wall and coming back and walloping her twice. So go to the Building Biology Institute. They've got a lot of free fact sheets that you might find some tips on. But where shielding is concerned, really see if you can deal with a professional. I'm not a certified building biologist. I just do education, but they're out there and they can help you.
I totally agree with you. And I remember the first time I saw, like on Amazon, they just sell shielding with no warning labels, no nothing. And it's very dangerous to do your own shielding inside your home. You have to really know what you're doing, and you have to be extremely careful, or you can make the situation so much worse.
Yeah.
So shielding is dicey. It's a
Yeah.
slippery slope. But since this question was about outside and fence, you know, I think you're pretty safe. Get a meter and test and see what happens, when
Yeah.
you
And
put up the
if you have a
metal.
nice neighbor, invite them over to watch Generation Zapped with you. Start the conversation if you have a nice neighbor, and then they might just get a little meter guard to put right over their own meter that may prevent it from shooting out in your direction. So that may be cheaper than getting a metal panel, who knows? But if you have
True.
a happy neighbor, and people are funny, some people are great and really appreciate the information. Other people, if you have time for a second, oh my gosh. So I wound up canvassing a neighborhood and I printed out a flyer pertaining to a water tank that had been polluted with all these cell antennas on it. And I walked up to a gentleman who was in his garage and I said, hey, I don't know, but our planning board, if you know, but our planning board is about to have a meeting about that. And I was within line of sight. I could point right to the cell tower. I said, you might want to just take a look at this information and see if you want to go. He takes my flyer, looks me dead in the eye and says, I don't care, or something like that. He just snarled at me, or not interested, he said. And he threw it away right in front of me. And so I was like, all right, have a nice day. And I walk off. And I'm thinking, we know it's a neurotoxin. We know it causes anger. I'm thinking this poor guy is probably getting cooked in his own home. And then as I'm walking further, I'm like, I should go back and get my flyer. I paid 50 cents for that. So, but I just kept going and I went into another street on a different part of the neighborhood. And before long, he showed up. He drove, he scouted the neighborhood and found me and gets out of his car. And I'm thinking, oh, here we go. And he came up and he said, I owe you an apology. I behaved very badly. And I said, can you help me understand kind of what brought that on? And we got to chatting and I said, I was going to come back and ask for my flyer back. And he said, I'll go get it for you if you want it. And then we talked some more and he confided that his daughter down in New Jersey has been having trouble getting pregnant. And I said, maybe you want to keep that flyer and just go look at the resources that I provided to you. So he was on the far end of, I hate this, I don't want to know about it. And with a simple conversation, he came around with an apology and he might actually help his daughter get pregnant. Who knows? So every day is a new day.
This is true. We have another question, someone asking, are there EMF meter apps? And I'm assuming the question is about a phone app. And I believe that there are, but because I'm not a fan of cell phones, I'm not a fan of using an app on a cell phone to measure EMF. It just seems like kind of counterproductive, but there are some out there. I remember hearing about them. I've never used one, don't know how accurate they are. So
Yeah,
it's much
ditto.
better just to get a meter, a handheld meter that yeah, that has, some kind of credibility.
Yeah. Yeah, and Safe Living Technologies is a good company. There's also Coronet. A lot of people like that. You need to make sure you get one that's actually measuring radio frequency though. So, but we can, all that information is available on our websites. So, well, thank you, everybody. Is there any other questions? Anyone want to raise a hand and say anything? Well, you've been so gracious. We went a little longer than we normally do, but I'm so excited to talk to Deborah and just so grateful for all the work that you've done. And you're such an inspiration to us here on the mainland. And Thank you for
Thank you,
looking after
Cece.
us.
The feelings are more than mutual. And we're doing another one of these. So if you learned something or enjoyed, please tell your friends, family, whatever, to tune into the next.
Yeah, January 10th, 6 p.m. Eastern. And again, we put all these recordings online, so if the time doesn't work, we'll make it available and then come back live another time and ask questions. All right, everybody, mahalo. Thank you so much. And
Mahalo.
we'll see you next week.
Aloha.
Aloha. Bye-bye.